This Carlos Ghosn story gets wilder and crazier with every single day. You can't make this stuff up. In case you don't know, Carlos Ghosn is the ex-CEO of Nissan, and he was in Japan and he fled Japan. He's now an international fugitive, and he ended up in Beirut a couple days ago. My name is Eric, and I talk about automotive news. Generally, I talk about cars, but this story is so interesting that I just couldn't pass it up. So if you're interested in this kind of story, go ahead and just hit the like button, and it would be cool if you subscribed. Let's get us to 100K. Carlos Ghosn is the ex-CEO of Nissan, and he was also the chairman of Mitsubishi and also Renault. So he was in Japan for quite a few years. He was running these companies, and he was charged with a wide range of financial crimes. And ultimately, this led to his house arrest, and he now ended up in Lebanon. So let's look at how all this happened. Carlos Ghosn was the CEO of Nissan for quite a number of years, I think about 18 or so, and Japanese prosecutors charged him with a wide variety of crimes while he was the head of Renault and Nissan. So this is like an international thriller. On New Year's Eve, right around New Year's Eve, he was under house arrest in Japan, and he fled, and apparently this cost a couple $100,000. He fled from Japan and made it all the way to Lebanon, and he did this completely undetected by the Japanese authorities. Today, he held a 2.5-hour press conference, and he absolutely slammed the Japanese authorities and his former employer, saying it is a corrupt system.
I have spent the previous months being interrogated for up to 8 hours a day without any lawyers present, without an understanding of what exactly I was being accused of.
So the whole Ghosn case is actually bringing a lot of Western light onto the Japanese prosecution system and the criminal justice system there, and a lot in the West have actually been pretty critical of it as being quite unfair, and it's not really like Western justice systems. I found this on the BBC. The Japanese criminal justice system is focused on interrogation. The aim is getting a confession, explains Nobu Gora, who spent 23 years in the prosecutor's office before resigning. Ghosn said the Japanese prosecutors were pushing really hard for a confession.
It will get worse for you if you don't just confess, the prosecutor told me repeatedly.
But how exactly did we get here, and how did this whole thing transpire? How did Ghosn escape from Japan? That's what everybody wants to know. So let's look at that. Now, I've got a Discord chat. It's absolutely free. It's going to be linked down below if you want to chat about cars and other stuff. There's quite a number of members. It's quite active. Go ahead and check it out. So this all started in November of 2018. Ghosn was living in Japan, and the Japanese prosecutors, essentially, they didn't charge him, but they alleged that he was hiding the true amount of his executive compensation, so they arrested him for the first time. So at this time he was arrested, and he spent 100 days, actually more than 100 days, in detention, apparently some of it in solitary confinement, and this is prior to being charged. Now, he was rearrested 2 more times on increasingly serious charges, but in March of last year, he finally made bail, and I can't quite get the number straight. There are reports of between $4.5 million and $9 million for bail. So the story is far from over, of course. Nissan dismisses him as chairman. Mitsubishi also dismisses him as chairman. Finally, he is indicted for underreporting his income by $43 million US. Now, during this time, Nissan has conducted an internal investigation, and they find that he has allegedly siphoned $30 million from Nissan to a business partner in Oman, which is in the Middle East, and those funds ended up finally in some sort of bank account in Lebanon. And of course, the allegation is that he controlled this bank account. Now, Ghosn was behind putting together a joint venture between Mitsubishi and Nissan, and then the allegation is that $9 million came from this joint venture, and that ended up somehow exiting Nissan and ended up under Ghosn's control as well. So he spends a total of about 3 months in jail, and as I said earlier, this has brought a lot of attention to the Japanese justice system. Now, I did some research, and feel to correct me if you have more information on it, but My understanding from reading up is that the Japanese justice system has the presumption of guilt until you are proven innocent, and that is essentially the reverse process or the reverse system of what we have in the West, at least in North America and in the UK, where the presumption is you're innocent until you're proven guilty. Now, once you're arrested in Japan, you can be held for up to 23 days without being charged and apparently without access to legal counsel. They can interrogate you for as long as they want without having counsel in the room, and also these interrogations are not recorded. And so they have a strategy of getting around this 23-day rule, and that is by rearresting someone on additional charges or slightly altered charges. So in the end, they kept Ghosn in some sort of detention for about 130 days, according to him in his press conference. So in March of 2019, apparently he posts bail. It's, I think, around $4.5 million. It could be up to $13.9 million, but it's clearly a large sum of money, and he gets house arrest. Then in April, just a month later, he gets arrested for the 4th time. They take away all 3 of his passports, and he's not allowed to contact his wife at all. Apparently, they believe that she's an accomplice and that by contacting her, he's going to, I guess, spoil the evidence or perhaps do something like flee the country. I don't know. At this time, another allegation comes up that he has siphoned $5 million away from Nissan, put it into his wife's company, and then a yacht was purchased with that money. Now, of course, Ghosn has claimed innocence of all of these accusations and charges in the press conference today. And one of the things that he did, he had a PowerPoint presentation and he talked about all of the ways he was able to increase profitability at Nissan, and now everything has sort of gone downhill, and he says that this $5 million is just a drop in the bucket and I have an explanation for it. However, he didn't provide an explanation at the press conference, so that still is kind of up in the air. We're not quite sure what's going on. And one thing is I couldn't really find a lot of specifics from the Japanese prosecutorial team on what the charges are either, and my understanding is that it's not super transparent, and that those specific charges and specific allegations still have not been laid out. And maybe that is a function of the Japanese justice system. Maybe it's a function of this case. It's really hard to discern who is telling the truth in this situation. So the pressure is mounting on Ghosn, and there is an SEC case, the regulatory agency in the US, the Securities and Exchange Commission. They filed against Nissan, and they settled with Nissan in a suit which alleges that $140 million of retirement funds have not been properly accounted for. And of course, this was at the time when Ghosn was the CEO of Nissan. And of course, Nissan now says that he was in charge and he deliberately siphoned the funds away. However, the SEC levied a fine against Nissan, and that sort of concludes that part of the story. And this is where it really starts to get interesting, and this is where the escape comes in. So December 29th, a Japanese newspaper, and I'm sorry I'm going to butcher this name, Asahi Shimbun, they report that he basically walked out of the front door of his residence wearing a mask and a cap, and then took a taxi and made it to a hotel in Tokyo. Now, wearing a mask apparently is not that unusual in Tokyo and in Asia. You've probably seen a lot of photographs of it. People are trying to reduce the transmission of airborne viruses and so forth. So he doesn't have an ankle bracelet. Apparently the security cameras which are installed at his house is not quite sure. They don't capture him, or the cameras don't capture him in time. Anyways, he makes it to the hotel and he meets an American. The Financial Times says this American's name is Mike Taylor. He is an ex-Green Beret, and he's also an ex-convict. Apparently, he specializes in getting people out of difficult situations in war-torn countries. The details aren't super clear, but they managed to take a bullet train from Tokyo all the way to Osaka. It's about 300 miles. And again, there must be cameras at the train station and on the train. There's clearly evidence of him going there. Finally, they make it to a small airport in Osaka. And here's the really crazy part. It's not quite sure when this happens, but they load him into a large musical case for musical instruments, and they drill some breathing holes into it. They load the case with Ghosn inside onto a small private jet, and they take off. Now, you say, what about airport security? So they were doing this right around the new year, and apparently there weren't that many staff there. It's a very small airport, checked into a private lounge, and they got onto the plane without any x-ray, without any examination of this case. So there's actually no record of Ghosn leaving Japan. So they take this private jet, they go all the way to Turkey, Istanbul, and then another private jet all the way to Beirut, where he enters Lebanon on a French passport, apparently with correct documentation, and that's where he is today. So once again, there's all kinds of questions for Japan. This is very embarrassing for Japan. How did he get out of the country when apparently he was under house arrest? It's a big thing. I don't think that would be so easy to do in the US or some other countries, but now, clearly this is a pretty elaborate operation. There's reports that this planning went on for several months. Apparently about $350,000 was spent just on the private flights alone. And we're dealing with a lot of people here. We're dealing with this American Green Beret, this ex-Green Beret, excuse me. We're dealing with people that staffed the private jets. Apparently one of these staff members has been investigated already and perhaps might be charged. That's not quite clear. But there are a lot of people involved, and the Japanese authorities, and probably some other authorities, you can believe that there is an investigation going on as to how this actually happened. But here's the kicker. Lebanon has no extradition treaty with Japan. So it's going to be pretty difficult for Japan to get Ghosn back into Japan. His wife is also with him in Lebanon, and a warrant has been issued for her arrest. They are alleging that she lied, I guess during a deposition or some type of hearing, about her contacts, and now there's suspicion that she helped him escape. So the Japanese want to get him and his wife, Carol, back to Japan, but that seems like that's going to be very, very difficult. I'm going to have more information on this really interesting story as soon as it's available, and I'm going to be going back to automotive commentary, reviews, and news. Also, so if you like this channel, go ahead. There's a couple of videos up on screen right now. I want to thank my Patreons. They're also up on screen. Furious Grommel, Squirrel Pope, Real 6, Marlboro Ferrari. There's a bunch of others that are up on screen. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to become a Patreon, go ahead and click down below. My name is Eric. I will see you in the next video.